Hey there, my name is Joel. In this video, I'm going to talk about hi-hats. I think you may find this really interesting because I'm going to try to decode the hi-hat, or at least the roles that each cymbal plays in the hi-hat pair, because hi-hats are a pair of cymbals. And if you've noticed, when you see a pair of hi-hat cymbals that are sold as a pair, one of them will inevitably say top on it somewhere, and one will say bottom. One is the top cymbal, one is the bottom cymbal. You have a pair of hi-hats, and one is the top, it's on top, and one's the bottom, it's on bottom. So we have top and bottom cymbals. Why? Why is one the top and one the bottom? Can't I put the bottom on top and just kind of do what I want? Well, you can, but if you've ever done that, and I'm sure a lot of you have, you notice that they perform very, very differently, particularly modern hi-hats. Now, if you have an ancient pair of hi-hats from the 50s or something, that may not be the case, because back in the day when hi-hats sort of became a thing, really it was just a pair of matched cymbals. And by matched, I mean matched by weight. It was really common to order hi-hats, or really cymbals, by diameter and weight, rather than crash and ride and splash and hi-hat and all that kind of stuff. So when you would buy hi-hats, oftentimes you would buy like a pair of 13-inch medium weight cymbals, or 14-inch medium, or medium thin. And both cymbals would be medium or medium thin. It was pretty rare that you would have one that was lighter than the other. Although that did happen. If you look at some of the cymbal setups of early Zildjian endorsers, like from the 50s, and you'll see that it'll say hi-hat medium. And every once in a while, you'll see someone say hi-hat top medium thin, or something like that, which is, so you had a mismatched pair of hi-hats. But hi-hats were forever just a pair of cymbals that had been put together. And so as such, they were typically very similar in weight and shape and lathing and hammering and all that kind of stuff. And you could pretty much, swap positions, and it wasn't any big deal. But that changed in the early 60s when Louis Bellson, I believe in 1963, teamed up with Zildjian to create a new type of hi-hat, a new formula for a hi-hat, if you will, which wound up being the new beat hi-hat, which Zildjian still makes to this day. And it's really interesting. So successful were the new beat hi-hats that by the 60s, the late 60s, you looked at all the Zildjian endorsers, and like 90% of them used new beat hi-hats. All the people who were using matched hi-hats or matched weight hi-hats were using new beat hi-hats. Well, how are they different? Well, the new beat design used a heavier bottom and a lighter top, which today is the standard formula from all manufacturers for hi-hats. But why? Why add weight to the bottom cymbal, or why pair a lighter top cymbal with a heavier bottom cymbal? What does each cymbal do? Well, if you think about what was happening in the early 60s with music in general, amplification was really becoming a thing. Rock and roll was really taking off, and you had people getting guitar amps cranked up and making higher wattage amps. Things were getting really loud. You had PA systems starting to, they were still really primitive, but they started kind of coming into their own. And, the guitar amps might each get a mic, and the drums might get one mic overhead and one in front of the kick drum or something. That was not unusual, but typically bands at this time were starting to play larger places and needed some sound reinforcement. And the hi-hat plays a really strong role, whether in big band music or jazz music in general, or just rock music, people hacking away on it. The hi-hat was a really key part of the rhythm of the drum kit. And even today, we put, two microphones over the top of a drum kit, but we'll still mic the hi-hat separately because we really want it to speak. Well, back in the day when you had like one mic sort of capturing the kit and then another one maybe in front of the bass drum, the only way to make the hi-hat speak more was to really make them louder. Well, how do you make cymbals louder? I haven't gone into any of that yet in any previous video, but basically the short answer is you make them heavier. And so you can make them heavier by making them larger. You can make them heavier by just making them thicker and heavier. But if you just make them heavier, then they tend to be less dynamically responsive. And so what they found with hi-hats is that they could have made them louder by just making both cymbals heavier. So instead of having a pair of medium hi-hats, you could have a pair of heavy hi-hats, and they would be louder. But you would also notice that they're not very dynamically responsive. They would sound kind of bell-like. They wouldn't really have the timbre that we want from hi-hats, that sort of washy kind of sound. But with, greater penetration. Giggity. The only real way to do that was to pair a heavier bottom with a lighter weight top. And basically, the formula came down to this, and this is really, like I say, it's kind of the formula that all manufacturers use now. I mean, everyone who makes cymbals pretty much now for the Western market, for pop music, for jazz, things like that, you're going to find that hi-hat pairs generally have heavier bottom cymbals and lighter top cymbals. And this is what the basic role of the two cymbals are. The top cymbal pretty much establishes the overall timbre of the pair. It gives you the character. Do you want trashy sounding hi-hats? Do you want really bright hi-hats to cut through like a heavy, dense rock mix? Do you want kind of a general sense of wash, kind of all-purpose, fairly bright, but also kind of complex so that you could use it across a bunch of different genres? That top cymbal, whatever that is that you want, the top cymbal is really going to provide the majority of that characteristic. It's also going to provide the dynamic response. So you don't want that top cymbal to be too heavy or it's not going to respond very quickly. Now, smaller cymbals, smaller hi-hats, that's less metal overall. They will respond a little bit faster. But in general, you want that top to really respond and have the wash and the character that you want it to have. Then if you want more penetration and volume from the pair that top cymbal with a heavier bottom cymbal. And the bottom cymbal does contribute something in the way of timbre to the overall pair, but not as much, considerably less influence on the overall character than the top cymbal. And why is that? Well, to demonstrate what I'm talking about, I am going to take a Paiste 802 bottom cymbal, which, by the way, I've got all of these measured in weight. And this bottom cymbal is 1,082 grams in weight. And this cymbal is an old Ludwig Standard that was made by Paiste back in, I don't know, the 50s or 60s or so. It weighs 536 grams. It's roughly half the weight of this. And despite it being not really hand hammered, it's made of nickel silver. As you can see, it's not a bronze, which is interesting. Nickel silver, the name. There's actually no silver in it. It is a copper, nickel, and zinc, I believe, alloy. Just to give you an idea about the difference between the top and the bottom, I'm mismatching these cymbals just to demonstrate, but you'll see the top cymbal is very earthy. It's almost China-like. It's really kind of trashy sounding.
China.
Compared to the bottom cymbal, which is very, very clear and bell-like. So you got this trashy top and this really bell-like, clean, articulate bottom. And if we put the two together, what are we going to have? Kind of a cleanish, trashy-ish pair of hats? No, you're going to have still a trashy hi-hat, but it's going to have a very metallic sound. Now, you don't really notice how clear and penetrating that bottom cymbal is when it's activated by the top cymbal, because the top cymbal, when you hit it with the stick, that character then gets translated or transmitted to the bottom, because you're not playing the bottom cymbal with a stick getting that type of sound. The bottom cymbal is being activated by the top cymbal, which already has this sound. So as that activates that bottom cymbal, all that weird trashy harmonic stuff is what's being transmitted to that bottom cymbal, and the bottom cymbal is more or less reacting to that, not to a direct stick hit. So you don't get any of that penetration. Now, just a quick little story. The first time I flipped hi-hats up and down I was probably 13 years old. 14, 12, I don't know, somewhere around there. At my church, they had a pair of New Beat hi-hats, and one day I just kind of was like, got a wild hair, crazy, gotta watch it, and I put the bottom on top just to see what would happen. And I didn't really like the way it responded, because it just didn't have the dynamic response for one thing, and those were machine hammered cymbals, and it just had an overall brighter sound with the bottom cymbal on top that I didn't really care for, so I pretty quickly put it back the way they were and left them that way. And from that point, I generally just played hi-hats the way they were marked, top and bottom. But what made me sort of kind of rethink hi-hats and really starting to mix and match hi-hats like I've already done here with this heavy Paiste 802 bottom and this Ludwig Standard on the top, was when Zildjian in the late 80s came out with the KZ hi-hats. And basically what they did was they just took the top hat from the regular K series hi-hats. It's a K hi-hat top with a Z hi-hat bottom. In 1986, Zildjian came out with the original Z line of cymbals. They're all unlathed, and they had one of four rather radical geometric-looking hammer marks. And the bottom of the Dyno Beat hi-hats, which were the hi-hats for the Z series, was a very heavy, unlathed cymbal that had this hexagonal hammer that was kind of done in kind of a neat geometric pattern. And the Z cymbals in general, I wasn't very pleased with or interested in. I thought they looked cool. I wanted to like them because they just looked cool to me, my 18-year-old self. But they were really kind of made for sort of the metal crowd because they were heavy, unlathed, loud cymbals. Despite that, Dave Weckl, Vinny Colaiuta, Jeff Porcaro, who's a Paiste endorser, a lot of people actually use the KZ hi-hats, and I wound up personally owning a pair of 13s and 14s of the KZs. I wish I had them now because they were incredibly useful because they had the complexity of the K hi-hat top, which was basically like their hand-hammered version of the new beat, basically their standard K hi-hat. And so it was kind of a medium-heavy sort of top. It responded well, but it was real crisp, but it still had that sort of complexity that the hand-hammering gave it. And then that bottom cymbal didn't make it like rock and roll or anything. That bottom cymbal just made it very articulate, very clear, and made it project really well. And the 13s particularly, I remember really digging. The 14s were a little on the sloshy side. They were just heavier overall. But they were really good, useful hi-hats, musically useful for a lot of different genres. And then I made the stupid mistake of getting rid of them, selling them. That's a whole other story. But anyway, so what I'm going to do now that I've sort of explained in a general way what's going on with the hi-hat code, if you will, is I'm actually going to create a pair of hi-hats from various hi-hats. I've got a lot of hi-hats. I've got a pair of 12s. I've got 5, I think, pairs of 13s. I don't know how many 14s. 4 or 5, 4, I think, 15s, and 2 16s. I got a lot of hi-hats. But I'm going to do a 13-inch pair for this kit. And why? Well, I know I want it to be 13 because I want it to be kind of quaint sounding. This is a singer-songwriter setup. I want kind of a singer-songwriter, intimate, chill sort of hi-hat cymbal for this song because the kit, as you can hear, is a really dead, singer-songwriter type of kit. It's actually, you may notice, it's the Ludwig combo kit from my previous video. If you haven't seen that, I will link to that below. Single-headed kit, bass drum single-headed, the toms are concert toms. Using the same heads that I used in that video, by the way, but I'm doing my tea towel trick. Also another video that I did. If you haven't seen my tea towel video, I've got kind of a way I like to do it versus how I've seen a lot of people do it. Nothing really, I guess, earth-shatteringly different. But I'll link to that and you can watch that. But basically a very, very dead sound. And the snare, giant big donut that I cut out of a head here. And I want some hi-hats that are going to go well with this kit. So I know that I want them to be 13-inch. So first I'm going to try all of my various 13-inch hi-hats just to see if any of them really sort of fit the role that I want them to play in this particular setup. And if not, I'm going to then mix and match to try to come up with hopefully the perfect match of hi-hats for this particular setup for a song that I want to record. And in doing so, I will hopefully demonstrate to you, reinforce the relationship between top hi-hat and bottom hi-hat cymbals, how they play together. And this is information that you can use to help you, find the right hi-hats for you. You don't have to go out and mix and match a whole bunch of stuff, but just sort of understanding this, you can then have a more informed opinion as you look at what hi-hat options you have on the market and stuff. And particularly if you're buying something online and you don't have a chance to play it ahead of time, understanding some of, how weight plays a role and, lathing and stuff. And like I say, this isn't an exhaustive thing. I'm just going through the 13-inch hi-hats that I actually have just to try to come up with the ideal pair. But hopefully it'll be useful, so that's what I want to do. So let's get started. The first pair of hi-hats I have here is this pair of Meinl HCS brass hi-hats. Now, you may be thinking, Joel, why do you have brass hi-hats? Aren't those sort of garbage or rubbish? Yes and no. They are definitely inexpensive cymbals, but I find them charming. There's something about them. These are, first of all, these aren't your brass. Let me see. I've got some, oh gosh. I got some real rubbish cymbals. And are they back here? Yeah, here, check this out. Like this NX series brass. I actually polished these not long ago. These are garbage cymbals. I mean, I don't mind saying that. Melodious, really cheap cymbals. And that's not really what these are. These are actually rather heavy, and they're actually hammered and they're lathed. It's a simple lathing pattern. It's definitely an inexpensive cymbal, and obviously they're made of brass. But I kind of like them. First of all, I got them for 30 bucks. And I actually like them for sort of a lo-fi quality that still wants to feel musical. But they still have a little bit of mass, a little bit of weight, a little bit of brightness to them. Probably more than what I'm going to want here. But believe it or not, they may actually fit this kit a little better than you think. But just real quick, the bottom cymbal is 884. And the top cymbal is 688. That's grams, by the way. So top cymbal is like, what, 3/4 the weight of the bottom cymbal. I've noticed that inexpensive pairs, by the way, they still have the heavier bottom, but the difference between the bottom and the top tends to be a little bit less dramatic. Some really nice cymbals often have fairly wide weight ranges, for what that's worth. But check this out. So you can see they're actually kind of cool sounding. They're metallic, they're clear, but they're not overly bright. However, once they start to open up, they are kind of bright. Now I could probably tape them down, and that would make them a lot darker sounding, a lot less shimmer to them. But it wouldn't do much for the weight, and I do think they feel still a little bit heavy. But I could use those, and I could probably make it work. I could probably EQ them and do some stuff with them. But let's try something different. Let's try that 802 pair that I used the bottom cymbal on earlier. Now the 802, these are B8 cymbals. The bottom is 1,082 grams. It's heavier than the brass ones I just had. And the top is 812 grams. These are made of B8 bronze, or 2002 bronze, Paiste likes to refer to it. These are sort of a mid-level cymbal. They don't make them anymore, but and I got these like with a drum kit or something. Most of these hats came with something. I did buy those Meinls that I just played, believe it or not, but they were 30 bucks and I actually liked them. So these are definitely brighter, still machine hammered, still a rather crude kind of lathe to them. They are a less expensive line of cymbals, and they are made of B8, which is common for inexpensive cymbals. Pretty bright, but let's just see. Okay, one thing, first of all, how I'm playing. This is a singer-songwriter tune that I'm going to be playing. And so I'm not going to be going, just wailing away on the drums. This is definitely a very chill, very laid back, not a heavy thing. I'm kind of letting the mics do the work for me, and the processing and the tuning and stuff, and just so I'm not playing hard. So I don't want the hi-hats to do much. So that's very important to the style that I'm playing. I'm not going to be hacking away at these. One thing to keep in mind. So I'm interested in hats that are going to respond to light playing. Another thing to note that's true of almost all hi-hats, when they are closed, the sound is darker than when they're open. When they're open, there's no airlock. When the two are closed, the air inside is kind of locked in there, and it actually sort of mutes both cymbals. It's not just the fact that there's pressure and, you know, friction or inertia or whatever it is, you know, that's the pressure, the force that's holding the cymbals together so they don't move so much. If the airlock wasn't there, they would maintain the brightness even when they were closed, and I have another pair that I will use to demonstrate that, so I probably jumped the gun on that point, but who cares? So again, softly played and closed, so the airlock is muffling them a little bit. But once I open them, they're bright, they're strongly metallic, which tends to be the case with heavier pairs. And I definitely want something lighter. So let's move on to something else and see what we have. Another pair of 13s that I have is this wonderful pair of Mastersounds. This, I was just speaking about the lack of airlock. This rippled bottom edge that the Mastersound hi-hats have eliminate any possibility for airlock. You simply cannot shut these cymbals off, at least with regard to air, because of that rippled bottom edge. And actually, I think Paiste might have invented that. All my life, I've known about that rippled bottom edge on the Sound Edge hi-hats, and it was like maybe, I don't know, 15 years ago or something, that Zildjian all of a sudden had the Mastersound hi-hats that had a similar rippled bottom edge. Before that, Zildjian's sort of hi-hats that didn't have much airlock or didn't have airlock were the quick beat hi-hats, which were made to be bright. They were heavier cymbals made for rock, pretty much, or just higher pitched, more penetrating hi-hats. And part of that keeping them high pitched was the lack of airlock, which they accomplished by drilling 4 holes in the bottom cymbal. The bottom cymbal, by the way, was also like flat, didn't have a bell. So that was an interesting pair of hats. I've never owned those, but I have played them. But there's no airlock here, so you'll notice that the open sound, the timbre stays the same when they're closed. And even though I can push pretty hard with my foot on the pedal, the attack still kind of is going chit, 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 rather than tick, tick, tick. I'm playing with the bead on top of the cymbals. Also, not only am I playing softly, but I'm playing with the bead to make it very articulate. You know. So even though I'm playing softly and just on the top with the tip of the stick, you can tell they're bright. So, not the pair I'm looking for. But cool hi-hats. They are a sound, though. Any hi-hats that don't have airlock, either through rippled edges or holes drilled in one of the cymbals or whatever, you're always going to get a brighter sound. You're going to get a more consistent tone between the open sound and the closed sound rather than getting a darker sound when they're closed. I personally generally prefer the airlock, the sound that the airlock, the choking, the muffling, the control, the closure to the sound when you choke them off. That airlock really seems to help that to me. By the way, the bottom cymbal on this was 1,122 grams. It's the heaviest so far. And the top was 818. All right, so another pair of cymbals. Let us try. This one is a mismatched pair of cymbals. Both Zildjian, but the bottom is a recent-ish, I don't know what year this would be, but probably maybe in the last 10 or 15 years. It's a projection hi-hat. Look at the size of that bell, by the way. That's like a normal bell there, kind of a new beat sort of, I don't know, kind of bell, and then you got this big projection bell. It's also fairly heavy. It's 1,046 grams. I'm not sure how I think I may have bought that at some point. I don't know. This one, I thought I had a matched pair, but the more I think about it, I think I probably did only have just this one cymbal. But this, by the stamp on it, this cymbal's from the 50s. It's a 13-inch Zildjian. It weighs 638, which is relatively thin grams. So 638 top compared to a 1046 bottom. This is rather penetrating. And the top is, despite being machine hammered, is rather dark. It's got patina all on it, and so it's kind of dull. But anyway, mismatched pair, but let's just see what they sound like. Okay, so that top cymbal, that's where all the character's coming from. Bottom's very penetrating, but the pair sounds really vintage. But they sound really metallic too. That metallic quality really is because of the heavier bottom cymbal. That heavier bottom cymbal makes them louder. It gives the overall timbre a bit more bite, a bit more metallic characteristic. If it was a lighter cymbal, they'd have what I call more of a papery kind of sound, not so metallic, not so edgy, not so bright, maybe more of a plastic kind of papery sound. But the heavy bottom also gives the pair more articulation. So it helps them to speak. And again, the airlock, just shutting the cymbals off. I like that characteristic. But it's not a bad pair. Definitely dark because of the top cymbal. But I got one more pair. I think that's the fourth one, right? We have the Meinl, the Paiste, the Mastersounds, and then this mismatched pair. And then the one that, honestly, I'll just tell you straight up, the pair that I was expecting to like the most for this type of setup. And that is the pair of Ludwig Standards that I used back at the beginning of the video. I used one of them. But, and these are old. These are pre-New Beat formula. They are matched weight. This one's 536 grams. This one is 526 grams. There's 10 gram difference. But for the sake of consistency, I will put the heavier one on the bottom, though there's not a significant difference in sound between these two cymbals. But they are both very lightweight. 536, 526, that is extremely lightweight. And as you can tell, very earthy, kind of trashy, dark. And the bottom equally so. There is kind of a brightness to this pair, though, in spite of the earthiness of it. And I think that's because of the alloy. I've always heard that the nickel silver, the NS12 alloy, kind of has an overall brightness to it. And even though it's very, very thin, the profile is not particularly flat. A flatter profile for a cymbal tends to deepen or lower the pitch. But it's basically a very fast pair, and notice they don't sound metallic-y. They don't have that metallic quality that the previous pair had. That's more what I kind of call the papery thing, which is kind of what I'm thinking for this song, at least to begin with. Okay, so that's automatically in the ballpark. That's close. That's what I was expecting when I thought of doing this setup and trying to get this kind of sound. This is the pair that I was thinking of. However, I am going to mix and match this, and I think I can probably improve upon it. Now, between the two cymbals, you know, this is going to be the top cymbal. One of these will be the top cymbal because, again, the top cymbal gives you the overall character of the hi-hat. So I have here the bottom, and I have here the top. And I like the bottom better. Something about it, it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another. But if I was pushed, I'd say I like the bottom, or the heavier one, the one that's 10 grams heavier. I like that one better, and it's still very thin, so I'm going to use it as the top cymbal. And I'm going to just try some different cymbals for the bottom to kind of give me my final sound. And I dropped the washer. Dang it, gotta find it. All right. So this is going to be my top. Ludwig Standard, very lightweight, nickel silver. Kind of earthy and cool. And let's just go ahead and try some heavy bottom cymbals, like I say, and just kind of see what happens with it. So I will go back to the projection bottom, which was heavy. 1046 is the weight in grams. And that is not bad. I could use that. It's a little prettier than using just the standard, the Ludwig pair alone, because of that really articulate bottom cymbal. But notice that the overall character still is defined by the top cymbal and the dynamic response. And I do love airlock for hi-hats. That's not bad. Let's see what else we got. I'm not going to use the Mastersound bottom because it has airlock. Let's try the Paiste. Now, the Paistes were, I think, the brightest cymbals that I had. The B8, and the bottom cymbal's really heavy. Even though it says bottom, I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to use the top cymbal instead. This is the top cymbal of the pair, but it still weighs 812 grams compared to 536. That is a sufficiently heavier bottom cymbal. B8 and bright, kind of medium bright. So let's try that. A little trashy for some reason, a little too. The extra weight and the brightness of that bottom cymbal didn't complement the top the way I expected it to. And I think it adds just enough of a metallic edge that it blends with that trashiness in sort of a non-complimentary way. So I think I'm not going to use that. What else we got? Well, how about I take that 50s Zildjian that I was using as a top. It's 638 grams, heavier than the 536 of this. Vintage B20 bronze cymbal. Let's just see what that does. That's very nice. I actually like that a lot. Let's try some other stuff. Let's go with the Meinl. The bottom is 884 of this brass pair of Meinl hi-hats. Put the nickel silver Ludwig on top. Let's see what that does. Not bad. Just for grins, let's try the top cymbal, which at 688 is 150 grams heavier than this one at 536. So that other one didn't sound bad. I don't know, it just didn't quite complement it the way I wanted it to. I like that. I like that. That definitely has that mid-range kind of white noisy trashiness to it, but it's not exactly like a China. It's not too trashy. And it's not very metallic. They're close enough in weight. It's sort of like a nicer version of just, you know, the two standards together, the original pair. Okay, I like that. I like that a lot. What else do I have? Is that kind of everything? I'm not using the Mastersound. I could use the Mastersound top. It's 818. Let's just try that just in the interest of thoroughness. But I really like that brass top, the HCS Meinl top, as the bottom for this pair. Okay, so that's immediately more metallic to me. Not bad. It's not bad, but it's not quite as charming. I want a real intimate sound. I want to be able to turn up the hi-hats. I'm going to play them softly, but I want them to be really intimate and articulate, which is why I'm using a condenser. I've got ribbons overhead, but I'm using a condenser mic on the hi-hats. That is, for those who care, that's an AKG C460, which is, they made them like in the 80s and early 90s. It has a transformer in it. I like that mic, but I like this pair. Okay, so this, I think I'm about done. I think I'm going to use these. One more thing I'm going to do to them, though. I want them to be a little bit more, when you hear how dull these cymbals are, particularly through ribbon microphones. These are old Zildjians from the 50s. This one's actually a trans stamp from the 40s. I want to mellow these out a little bit, so I'm going to take tape. And I put tape on the inside of the cymbals because that way I don't ever hit the tape and dull the stick response. But I'm going to put a piece of tape on the top. And you know what? I'm going to put maybe a couple. I'll put one on the bottom. Let's just see what that does. See how it takes away some of the overtones, the spread? There's not a ton anyway with this cymbal. It's brass and it's like lacquered, actually. So I think that lacquer is kind of stifling the brightness. But I want it a little more dead. And I might even put another piece on this one. Yeah, that's more dry. It doesn't have the spread and the sheen or the shimmer. Yeah, it's darker. See how it's got like a tick sound now? Tick, 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 instead of ding, ding, ding. It stays dark because it doesn't have all the overtones. All right, so that's it. That's it. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. Hopefully that is a useful little primer for hi-hat cymbals, and maybe you can make a little bit wiser choices when purchasing online, maybe used cymbals, and people give the weight. If you've ever seen people giving the weight in grams and wondered why, that's why. It gives you an idea of sort of what to expect when you know the kind of cymbal it is, how it's hammered and lathed, its overall shape, and then its weight. It kind of points you in the direction of what to expect so that you're not totally blindsided when you receive it. But hopefully that's useful to you. Hopefully that gives you some fodder for your own creativity and experimentation. So go play with that. Have fun. Thanks for watching this. I appreciate you hanging in here with me. If you like this kind of deep dive drum geek content, please subscribe, share with other people, and I just really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. I hope to see you next time.